Hi, I'm David Debato, and you've just entered the No Delusion Zone. Thank you for joining me on this edition of the No Delusion Zone and my very special guest, Juraj Krupa. Juraj is a member of the Slovak Parliament, also known as the Slovak National Party or
National Council.
National Council. I get them confused. There's so many different words in different countries, but it's the Slovak Parliament. Essentially, and he is the chairman. Correct me if I'm wrong here on the Defense and Security Committee.
I'm sorry, I have to correct you because I'm already in the opposition. So I used to be the chairman of the Security and Defense Committee, and I'm just a member.
Okay. You've taken a demotion because you're in the opposition. I understand, and I stand corrected. I must tell folks who may not have seen the prior short interview with you 3 weeks ago, that Juraj was my guest 3 weeks ago when we first attempted to do this discussion.
Oh, yes.
And during the interview, Juraj received a call from one of his colleagues that the Prime Minister of Slovakia, Robert Fico, had been shot and was the apparent victim of an assassination attempt. And we, of course, had to cut short the interview. It was an emergency crisis. And just now, 3 weeks later, I'm able to sit down with Juraj again and try to continue this discussion. But it would be foolish of me if I didn't, of course, open our discussion with talking about this assassination attempt, which has gripped the whole world, but obviously Slovakia and Eastern Europe especially. So if you could please, again, just briefly, if you want, Juraj, go through that day when you received the call and then bring us up to date, if you could, to where the Prime Minister is today.
Thank you, David. First of all, excuse me really from, there was really a specific situation that I had to quit the interview because I was receiving calls and messages constantly, and it was a really exceptional situation. Sitting in the parliament and hearing the people screaming, running around, it was kind of chaotic. So I couldn't continue the interview, and yes, it was a shock for the whole society, for the whole country. I mean, we went through many things in the history. Wars, etc., and political disturbances, but we haven't had any kind of assassination attempt of any politician in the history so far. So this is the first one, and on the Prime Minister. So it was kind of a shocking because nobody knew if he survived the assassination attempt or not. Those first minutes were kind of emotional and stressful. Also talking and seeing the colleagues in the parliament, so it was kind of exceptional, I would say. So he was shot by I would say a lone wolf, an older man, 71 years old, who just decided to shoot the Prime Minister. And he shot him actually 4 times. He was shooting 5 times, but he shot him 4 times, and the 5th bullet missed him. And he survived. Of course, he survived. It's known. But 4 bullets were shot in his body, and he had to undergo surgeries, 2 surgeries. One shot was in the belly, and the small intestine was hit, and as far as I know, and the stomach. And the second bullet went to his hip joint, which damaged it quite badly. and third and fourth went to the arm and to the leg. So it's been already 3 weeks, and he's already back to Bratislava, because this assassination attempt happened in central Slovakia, and he was stationed there in the hospital in central Slovakia. And it's been a few days. He's been transferred back to Slovakia. The information we're getting are not transparent enough. Even those information I was providing you are information we gathered in the last days about the injuries the Prime Minister had. So it was, and for now, even we don't know yet if he's back home or in a hospital in Bratislava, in the capital. But most probably he's already back home.
I'm assuming he's under a strict security guard at this point.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Okay. You briefly mentioned the shooter, 71-year-old man. Of course, that's been written about in the press, and you also mentioned that you believe that he was a lone wolf. That's also been reported in the press. Do you have any information at all, any evidence that he was acting under any kind of political stress or political beliefs, or was this just some man that was possibly mentally ill?
Well, I also mentioned transparency, providing information, and I would say we're missing, or we have a lack of transparency.
From the government.
From the government.
Okay.
So far, what we know, it's still the whole assassination attempt, and this person is under investigation. So we don't have any detailed information. We only know the information which were provided to the press, which were kind of confusing. First of all, about the transparency, all the information we are getting are provided by the Minister of Defense and Minister of Interior. So you don't get to see any doctors providing information about how the operation went, how are the injuries, how bad it is. So basically, it's just a partial information. And what is bad for this situation right now is that the government is not providing enough information. First of all, they started to say the first information was provided by the government that this person was a lone wolf. Second information, that he was not a lone wolf, that there was a group behind it. And that he might have been affected by these people, but then the information went back that he might have been just a lone wolf, back and forth. So, and of course, this is providing space for conspiracies. And even though the representatives of this government, of the coalition, were talking in the first days about some kind of an appeasement in the society and in Slovak politics, which are highly polarized, it's providing more to tension, providing more space for tensions, for conspiracies. We hear conspiracies that there might have been someone behind it, that the United States and its intelligence services are behind it, that the opposition, he was connected to the opposition, and so on and so forth. And you have, of course, Russian narratives and Russian propaganda and Russian disinformations getting also involved into this, that he was the one who was fighting for peace in Ukraine, and he was I would say a closer politician to Russia, and therefore he was assassinated. Something similar came from Viktor Orban from Budapest, that he was a big protagonist of peace in Ukraine, and this might have been the reason why he was assassinated. So now we are in a situation that which is causing a lot more tensions than before.
Well, I'd mentioned during our brief interview 3 weeks ago that I said that there's always the possibility that this is a false flag operation from the Kremlin. And it's no secret, Juraj, that in the past, Russia has conducted operations like this for the sole purpose of creating confusion and chaos and growing conspiracy theories so both sides work against the other. And that's exactly what's going on in Slovakia right now, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not saying, and I have no evidence specifically to blame the Kremlin, but this is right out of Kremlin 101, and before them, Soviet Union 101. And it's also known from what I'm reading that this gentleman, even though he was for peace in Ukraine, supposedly he was also he was siding with Russia before that. So he's gone both ways, apparently.
Exactly.
There's also, like you said, very little transparency. Where are the forensics? What type of weapon did he use exactly? What type of ammunition did he use exactly? Did he ever have any firearms training? The obvious questions: how was he able to get so close to him? To fire at point blank range. I'm a prior police officer and investigator and counterintelligence agent. This is absurd. Any competent security service would never allow anyone with a weapon to get that close to their president or prime minister. Why wasn't there a security cordon around him where everyone that got that close was searched or went through a metal detector? There's many, many questions. And I find it absurd that these questions have not been, well, they've probably been asked, but not made public.
Some of those questions are already answered when talking about the gun he used.
Okay.
He had the gun since 1992.
Okay.
So it was his personal gun he used.
All right.
It was a 9mm Luger. This is the fact we know. What led him to this assassination attempt? Well, it was also it was specific because a video on the day of the assassination attempt, when he was arrested, was leaked from the police station, where he was talking about his motivations, and one of those were the political situation, the war in Ukraine, that Fico was pro-Russian, etc., which is obviously very close to the reality. And but yes, we're having a discussion now about the security service. That from our perspective, they failed. I mean, there were like 6 or 8 guys around him. And when he started to shoot, he was able to shoot another 4 shots. And it took them really a while, and nobody was covering the prime minister. So he was lying on the ground, and the shooter was shooting at him. So it was kind of I mean, everybody who saw the images, and especially experts who understand how the security service should be working, I think they saw a lot of mistakes. And well, the problem is that the director of the security service is a political nominee, and he has never been the director or leading such a unit before in the past. And this is one of the reasons why we are asking the Minister of Interior to take action, but he's refusing. This is also a problem in general in Slovakia when we are talking about corruption, nepotism, etc. So this is something we're facing here a lot, that many people which are having the right political, I'll say, political affiliation, that these people are getting positions, higher positions in the state. And this is also impacting, of course, the functioning of the institutions, such as the security management, etc.
Well, it would be certainly a tragic result of this, or ironic result, if in fact this assassination attempt was the result of cronyism, of somebody being placed in a position where he was just a political appointee with absolutely no experience, and Mr. Fico was shot and almost assassinated because of this through his own system. That would be the ultimate irony.
And the irony of the explanation of the government is that when there was something wrong, and it was the mistake of the previous government.
Of course.
When the security service did something wrong, because the argument was that there was a lack of enough training in the last years. But I mean, first of all, you should know the handbook. You should know how to behave. You should know then when there is a shooter, one is going after the shooter, the other one is covering the prime minister. I mean, it's just the basics, and this didn't happen, and it was kind of a chaotic scene. But this is the situation we all saw. I don't know if someone is going to take the responsibility. I'm afraid not, but we'll see.
And you've mentioned it briefly, but I want to pursue it a little bit. What has been the overall reaction of the Slovak public to this assassination attempt and whatever chaos or inaction has taken place since?
Of course, it was a shock. The whole society was really in a shock state. It took some days to realize what really happened. This is really unusual for us here in Europe. I mean, the last assassination attempt in Europe on a prime minister took place, I would say, on Olof Palme in Sweden. I don't know if it was 79 or, I mean, it's 40 years ago, maybe more. So it was really a surprise, bad surprise. But everybody thought that, okay, now it's really a sign that Slovakia got through turbulent times, and we're in a very highly polarized state of the situation, that we should do something about it. And even though there were first calls in the first days about some kind of like an appeasement and try to find some common understanding of the both sides, but as I mentioned, lack of transparency and the way we are providing information, etc., and everything continues as it continued before. Attack on the media, on the civil society, etc., the foreign policy, and so on. I don't want to go so much into the details. Will be taking longer, but this continues. So I don't see any attempt of kind of like an appeasement. Basically, even though the government is blaming the opposition and the media for the assassination. So the tensions are high, are rising. The security situation has been tightened here in Slovakia, so you see more presence of the police, security services, etc.
Do you see the government as clamping down even more on the media, stepping up security around the country and becoming more authoritarian because of this assassination attempt?
I'm afraid they're misusing this situation to push harder on the authoritarian attempts they already did before. And yes, you mentioned the media, of course, mainstream media, because we are having a lot of disinformation media, which are suspicious of being financed directly by Russia or through other channels by Russia, and are also has been used by politicians of this government, of this coalition in the past, are still being used. There is this rise of disinformation media since 2014. So basically, since the war in Ukraine started. So the occupation of Crimea, the war in Donbass. And since then, basically, we have a total rise of disinformation media in Slovakia. And during the previous government and the COVID pandemic and so on, and the energy crisis, these politicians, which are now in power, just found out that using those disinformation media might influence part of the society, which will provide them political support, which provided them political support. They won the elections, not by far. I mean, they have a small majority of 3 or 4 votes in the parliament. So basically, this shows that the society is polarized, but shows also the impacts of disinformation, Russian interference in Slovak politics, in Slovak society, all these hybrid tools they're using. So it's got its toll for us. I mean, on the society. So, and when you see that the attack on the media, because the media are those which are critical, which are providing information about what's going on, scandals, corruption, etc. And so it's all starting to change. There are similarities between Hungary and Slovakia when you compare this, the media landscape. We used to have political debates in the media, several media. There are private media and there is this public media. It's slowly stopping. We now, from like 5 or 6 debates we used to have a week, we're having like 1, and we know that this will end soon as well. And
you were involved in the opposition against the government taking over the public media, the public stations. I mean, that was huge just before the assassination attempt. And I'm sorry, this assassination attempt and whatever subsequently happens as far as the security crackdown, again, I hate to keep beating what we call a dead horse, but this plays right into the Kremlin and what they would like to do. And it's no secret that they've been paying media and politicians for a long time to side with them. How many arrests have there been recently all over Eastern Europe, in Poland, and in Prague, for example, about this? So I don't know. All fingerprints or all evidence seems to trace back to the Kremlin.
Absolutely. I mean, we know it. We're aware of it. During the previous term and previous government, we were fighting the Russian influence as we could. But of course, the pandemic situation just hampered the whole attempts we were trying. Basically, the whole impact on many countries. As you can see, there is a wave of radicalization among all countries, especially Western Europe and Europe at itself. And we have proof about the Russian interference. We have proof about the taking influence on politicians. There are certain lists of politicians which are still active in this coalition, in this government, which have been most probably paid by Russians. They were distributed. When you see what's going on in the European Parliament, there were members of this parliament working for the Russians, working for the Chinese, cooperating with them, etc. And we have a list of our politicians which were there as well, cooperating with them, but nothing happened. Nothing happened. Basically, the Russian influence is rising here in Slovakia really high. They're getting more and more influence, and more influence also in this government, of course. How to tackle it? It's I don't know. I am aware that our intelligence service under this government came to such state that other partner and allies, start to limit the cooperation with our intelligence service, similar to Budapest, to Hungary. Because they're aware that sharing certain informations about Russian intelligence officers being active in Slovakia and around might be threatening, because these informations might be leaking out to Russia. And I got this information basically from several sources, from several partners and allies, because this is taking place. We all see what's taking place here in Slovakia. This government is trying to find closer ties to Russia, to Kremlin. You have meetings. You have situations that we didn't have before, that basically the Russian diplomats became a standard, having meetings with them here in Slovakia, with the ambassador. Even just recently, the new chairman of the Security and Defense Committee just signed an agreement with the Russian ambassador about improving the cooperation between Slovakia and Russia in cyberspace.
Who is this? Name the new chairman.
And the new chairman is a previous president of the police force of Slovakia, who spent a year in a prison for corruption, etc. And well, after the elections, he came out and he became the chairman of the Security and Defense Committee.
And his name is what?
His name is Tibor Gaspar.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And well, I mean, you have reports from the intelligence, civilian intelligence, military intelligence, National Security Agency, that of course Russia is doing cyber attacks, cyber interference in Slovakia. And signing such an agreement is basically going against the interests of the Slovak Republic. But we can continue. I mean, so basically, the situation here is that there is the Russian activities in Slovakia are rising, are a danger to our allies and partners here in Europe. And for NATO.
What you're saying, Juraj, is the actions that this current administration is taking are not dissimilar to what some governments, even in Western Europe, were doing prior to the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. However, things have drastically changed since February of 2022. But what you're saying is that in Slovakia, at least, and certainly with the current administration, they're going back in time, and they are continuing to actually expand upon agreements, yes, security, military, cyber, diplomatic agreements with Russia, in spite of their full-scale invasion of Ukraine and all of the war crimes and crimes against humanity that have been committed by Russia. In many countries right now, in Europe especially, this would be called treason. I'm sorry, I can say this, but I'm glad you talked about it. I know it's probably uncomfortable, but this is important. I mean, this is very important. Slovakia is rapidly becoming Hungary, and that's not good.
No, it's taking place much faster than it took place in Hungary, because it took them 10 years to come to this they are right now. We are 8 months after the elections, and this month the government is going to pass a legislation against the NGOs, think tanks and NGOs. The similar one was passed in Georgia, which is
foreign
agents, media. We already know. I have this information that the intelligence service started to focus on the opposition.
You?
So on many of
I
the
mean, you
opposition
meaning the
politicians.
opposition, people like
The
yourself.
opposition, yes. In general, I mean, several politicians,
Yes.
I'm sure, and I know, are already being under surveillance and they're taking measures against them. So there are many things taking place.
With the new foreign
And
agent law that's being proposed by
yes,
the Slovak government, does it allow for members of the opposition party to be named as foreign agents, or only media and NGOs?
NGOs, basically. So each NGO which is having a cooperation with any other NGO abroad, and and the budget from this cooperation grows about 5,000 euros, which is $5,000. You will be blamed as a foreign agent or or institution cooperating with with foreign partners, as they call it right now. And if there is a certain suspicion, without any court decision, you can be abolished, or the NGO can be abolished.
What members of the not what members, what are they investigating with certain members of the opposition? To your knowledge, what are they trying to look for?
Tapping phones, looking for into your, I don't know, well, I mean, looking into your personal life and everything they can find out, and basically try to do whatever is necessary to be done to weaken the opposition.
Did this
I just don't want to go
occur?
into
Did this
details.
occur prior to this administration?
We used to have this in the 90s. We used to have this during a period where the prime minister called Mečiar was in power, and he was using the intelligence service. There was a one known case internationally that they kidnapped the son of the president at the time and transferred him to Austria because it was suspicious and being under investigation in Germany or something. So they were trying to, just to do the harm and really do the bad things. I just don't want to go into the details here openly. Sure. So sure. We are aware that things are taking place. But what are the next steps? I mean, if you look at Hungary, first of all, I'm looking into the freedom of academic freedoms. So I know that certain universities might be closed after some time without getting any accreditation anymore, and going more into the freedom of speech. Even now they're planning a kind of like they call it like lax assassination attempt, where we like to also test the possibilities of impacting the freedom of speech. We'll see. We are expecting the law coming next week, so we'll see in detail what they're planning. And of course, then with this, of course, the opposition is the next one, and so on. The experience we have from Hungary, we have to check what kind of friends we have on the social media, on Instagram, on Facebook, because this might lead also to certain measures which might be taken by the government or by the intelligence service, etc., etc. So basically, yes, we are moving to an authoritarian regime. We're trying to fight it hard. We're really trying to fight it hard, but opposition is a minority. So basically, everything what goes to the parliament, it's being passed because they have the majority. But we're fighting there, we're doing obstructions in the parliament. We're organizing demonstrations. We're communicating with our partners abroad to make them aware. We know that the only one who is intervening really, and from whom they are having respect, is the European Union and European Commission. Because of the money and the funding which is provided from the European Union to the public investments in Slovakia. 80% of the public investments in Slovakia are Euro-funded, funded from the European Union. So of course, they're trying to keep kind of like a channel of cooperation with the European Union and trying to cover what they're doing in certain laws, which are always on the edge. And but they're doing what they do, and they keep on doing.
Well, and that's
So
the
it's-
only reason that Europe or the EU has any leverage at all over Orban, because he needs this money. He
Yes,
needs the money
exactly.
from the EU to survive. So when push comes to shove, he eventually backs down after doing a lot of
Yes,
damage because he
but
wants the spigots open from the EU.
exactly. But the EU is not doing enough.
No, of course not. Of course not. It's very sad. You know, I just interviewed a member of the opposition from Georgia. We mentioned Georgia before. It's unbelievable. I mean, here's another country smaller than Slovakia, but not by much. And they are going through, as you know, a very similar time. In fact, I believe they're closer to the end of democracy than Slovakia.
Absolutely. I mean, they are on the path to the Russian influence again.
Yes.
And they're aware of this. They're trying to fight it hard. Even though I expected the elections in Georgia, which are taking place, I think, next year, might change a bit the situation, but the Russian influence will remain. However, we have this Russian influence thanks that we're member of the European Union and NATO. We're in a better position. What I'm afraid of about like talking about the authoritarian regime, we might see that it won't come to this state that we will become a real authoritarian regime. But what I'm expecting is that we might become something like a controlled democracy. Controlled democracy. That means that you control the media, you control the information flow.
That's what Orban does. You know this.
That's what it is. And they call it the illiberal democracy.
Yes. It's legal illegality.
Exactly. So basically influencing the population with their narratives, with their information. The media should become the mouthpiece of the government. So therefore, it's going to be very tough for us to be seen, to be visible, to be heard, and to hear the criticism. And therefore, this might also impact the next elections, and the other following elections.
And so Russia gets another vassal country again without firing a shot.
The strength of small countries nowadays, international relations, is that they're members of organizations like the NATO or the European Union, which are consensus-based. So once you have a country which is blocking the consensus, you have an institution or organization which is totally blocked and not functional. And this might happen to NATO, this might happen to European Union. There is this number of more than 40% of the decisions of the European Union on Ukraine have been blocked so far by Hungary. And if there is another country like Hungary, which might have a closer relations, which we might be seeing in the next the upcoming time or the future, near future, this might be a danger for the whole European Union and for NATO as well.
And that's the goal of Moscow. I'm sorry, it's just very clear. They would love to disrupt NATO. That's the whole point of the hybrid warfare coming out of Moscow. All of it, the cyber attacks, the sabotage that's going on right now, all of the apparatchiks and agents that are fomenting violence and leading pro-Russia demonstrations. It's all part of what you're just talking about, which is to disrupt the unity of NATO and EU countries.
Yes, exactly.
And they're doing pretty well. I'm sorry if this makes you uncomfortable, but I have to ask, Juraj, is just talking to me and other people like me putting you in physical danger from the security services?
No, I wouldn't say that. I'm not afraid of this. No. What I'm afraid of more is some kind of like a construction of certain stories about me, some inventions about what might have been or what I might have done in the past or whatever, which might be, really invented by the intelligence services and used against me in my professional life as a politician, as an opposition politician, and so on. So basically, this is what I would be expecting to happen.
Okay, well, I'm glad because I've talked to other people in, like I said, in Georgia and some other Eastern European countries who are afraid of physical danger.
Oh
They
yeah.
they feel that speaking to Western media puts them and their families in harm's way, and I feel very badly about that. But that's where we're living today. You had mentioned briefly just now about the EU and the fact that they're not doing enough. I wanted to mention to folks that are listening to this broadcast that you are a candidate for a member of the European Parliament. Could you talk a little bit about that, your the candidacy, and also about the Parliament? Most people in America, believe it or not, don't even know it exists.
Okay. Well, the European Parliament, it's quite a big parliament, consists of 705 members of the parliament. Now it's going to be enlarged to 720 after these elections. And it's basically representing the members from all members of the member countries of the European Union, which are having an election. But it's not based on national, on national, how to say it? I mean, on the representation of the country, that you are representing the country as itself, but it's based on political affiliations, basically where you belong. Are you right? Are you left? Are you social democrat? Are you conservative, etc.? And there you have fractions, political fractions, basically, which is something like political parties throughout the whole European Union countries. So you have the EPP, which is let's say the conservative. Then you have Renew, which is the fraction basically consisting of the liberals, etc., etc. So then you have the Identity and Democracy, which are the radicals, and in the far right political parties, etc. And the specificity of the European Parliament is that it's not creating laws, it's controlling and approving the laws which are prepared by the European Commission. It's a very specific competency the European Parliament is having, and it's very important because it's having the control function.
You mentioned the European Commission. This is another very important group that most Americans, and I dare to say some in Europe, have never heard of. What's the difference between and the relationship between the European Commission and the European Parliament?
The European Commission it's like the government. It's the executive part of the whole European Union organization, consisting of 27 commissars. It's like 27 ministers, each having its own portfolio and dealing with either its agriculture, it's might be social issues, etc., etc. And they are preparing the policies and the legislation, which is then going through the European Parliament, being either approved or not approved. So this is basically it. And then you have the system of transposition of these laws into the national laws, because it's natural that the international law stands above the national law. Even the US is accepting certain international agreements, UN agreements, etc. And then you're transmitting it into your legislation that they're going to be compatible. And so this is basically what is taking place in the European Union. It's a complicated process, but it's working somehow. It's a lengthy process, but it's working.
Well, one of the biggest complaints that I hear among folks who do follow these issues is that neither the European Commission or the European Parliament have any enforcement capability, similar to the complaints I hear about the UN. Many of them are valid. They can create laws, they can change laws, they can recommend various policies and so forth. They can be ratified or shot down as it may be, but there's no enforcement to these laws. They're not a police force. They don't have a military. They're not even a judiciary. So they can't force individual countries or Europe as a whole to obey any of the policies that they create. What are your thoughts about that?
Yes, it's not exactly that they cannot enforce. They do enforce. How do they enforce? How the politics are influencing the enforcement is another thing. One thing, of course, the European Union is not having a police force or military. Neither NATO is having. It's group of countries which then unite if there's necessity, the Article 5, etc. The European Union is having its own judiciary system. So if you don't do the transposition of the legislation and you're breaking the European Union law, you go in front of the court as a country. And there is this infringement, you pay fines, the European funding can be stopped. And even you can lose the vote in the European Council. European Council is where the heads of states and governments are meeting and making the most important decisions, which is also another institution. There is the Article 7 of the Lisbon Treaty, which says if you harm or if you don't follow the legislation or go against the legislation, and also don't follow the jurisdictional decisions, you can lose the possibility of voting in the European Council. So basically, it could happen that one of the prime minister might be just attending and he can't say anything about what's taking place because the others will decide without him. So, and with the situation of consensus-based European Union, this means that you cannot block anything. So, but this is what I wanted to say is there is this Article 7 of the Lisbon Treaty, and it's been used only once in the history and against Austria, believe it or not, against Austria, because in the 90s, there was this government in Austria, a coalition, which there was a far-right party was participating or was member of this coalition. And this led the European Commission to this decision to use this Article 7, and Austria lost the vote for like 7 or 6 months, I remember now, the exact time. And now we have worse situations, talking about Hungary, talking about what's taking place here, and the European Union can't do any decision about using or this article against in this situation. Even though you have Hungary blocking aid to Ukraine, etc.
But the far right, and correct me if I'm wrong, is very likely to pick up many seats in Parliament this time around. They won't be a majority, but they're going to be a much more powerful bloc than ever before. Am I correct?
This might happen. You have this block, which I mentioned. What I mentioned is the fraction of identity and democracy.
Yes.
It's the fraction of these radicals. But then you have also non-partisan members of the parliament, which are also radical, but not even members of this fraction. And as I mentioned also before, that we have this wave of radicalization going through Europe. So we expect that the radicals, the far right, will gain more seats in the European Parliament, which might influence also the functioning of the European Union. Because one of the things which the European Parliament is doing is also voting for the members of the European Commission. So each of the commissars and the head of the commission has to be approved by the European Parliament. So if you don't have the agreement in the Parliament, you might have a problem creating the European Commission. If you don't have the European Commission, then the European Union won't be working. So this is the situation. So this might really impact the function of the European Union. And just to say, okay, whatever complicated it sounds, I would say one thing. If we wouldn't have the European Union, we would invent something similar to the European Union again, because otherwise it would be all of the small nation states having its own problems and issues among others, and trying to have businesses and bilateral relations and whatever among them, and this would cause a lot of tensions, a lot of problems internationally. So of course that the importance of the European Union itself is very, very important to Europe itself. And if it's not working, then this might impact the whole stability, the stability of the whole continent, and not only, but also I would say the stability also of the US, security-wise, economic-wise. It would have really major impacts. So the stability of the European Union is also of vital importance to the US as well.
I agree with you totally. I'm a big supporter of the EU, and like any big institution, organization, it has its problems. But as you alluded to, if there were no EU, there would be a need to invent one, because exactly. Otherwise Europe would descend into chaos. We would be in 1939 or 40 again, or before, actually. So that's not an alternative, or at least it's not a good alternative. My only complaint, and it's the same with the UN, is it needs to be strengthened. The enforcement policies need to be strengthened, but that's part of an ongoing process. We need it. The world needs it. Europe certainly needs it. Let me ask you, Juraj, who's running Slovakia right now? Who is taking Robert Fico's place, and what do you think of him?
I would say the number 2 in his political party, and it's Mr. Kaliňák, who is the vice prime minister and the minister of defense at the same time. So he took over. He's running now running now the government and making the press statements, etc., and running also the coalition talks what we have, because it's a coalition of 3 political parties. So he's the one who is running it. It's quite a strange situation, because nobody voted for him to run it, and there was no decision made. There was a decision made by the prime minister in the hospital, who said that you are going to run the government right now. So this is kind of an exceptional situation. For now, we don't know how long he's going to stay out of the office. So, and it's not regarding to the constitution and laws. There must be a prime minister. I mean, of course, it can be ill, whatever, but if he's not there in the office for like 1 year, then we change the constitution, or we vote, or we do some rearrangements in the government.
Need a special election, perhaps?
I don't think we can expect new elections so soon, but we might see some changes in the government, in the coalition. We don't know. This is still to be discussed and to see how they're going to make the decision, because I heard that the thing which might happen is that the prime minister, with these injuries he's having, he won't be physically in the same shape and condition as he used to be before, and that mentally he is also not, of course, after such an attack, you need time to recover, also mentally and psychologically. But there is the question if he's really interested or coming back to the office, if he will continue as the prime minister, or if there is going to be a reshuffle. We still don't know. This is also a question to be answered soon. I know, I hope soon.
I may be wrong, but it seems that your new stand-in for the prime minister, your defense minister, seems to be even more further right in terms of being Kremlin friendly and anti-Ukrainian than even Mr. Fico. Is that not true, or is that just a perception?
From this perspective, it's better. He's less pro-Russian. Okay. Even Fico was calling him, as far as I remember, some kind of, how did he call him? Like Westerner or this Western-oriented person. He's like a solitaire, one of those small group, which is, I would say, pro-Western, more pro-Western than pro-Russian, which is good for the country and for its foreign policy. But it's still to be seen how he will deal with this situation, and if he, because the society is polarized. It's like 50%, let's say, pro-Eastern, 50% pro-Western, and if he thinks that he needs to keep the support of the public they're having, this might lead to a situation that he might change his rhetorics. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, that leads me to one of my last questions. If that's the case, and he is in fact more pro-Western, more pro-Ukrainian than the prime minister, do you think there's a possibility of restarting military aid to Ukraine again from Slovakia?
It's the one of the logos of this political party, which is led by Prime Minister Fico, was not a single bullet to Ukraine. And what is funny, that the support to Ukraine continues from Slovakia, but on commercial basis. So far, I mean, Slovakia exported material, weapons. We provided the S-300 as the first ones, the anti-aircraft system, and also the MiG-29 and helicopters, etc. So we provided a lot of support before to Ukraine, military support. I think it was, the number was somewhere around 700 or 800 million euro, which is not a small number for such a country as Slovakia. But these guys continue on commercial basis, so they're not providing military aid from the stocks of the armed forces, but they're selling the ammunition and material through other channels, etc. And for now, in the last 8 months, they provided this aid in the sum of $500 million. So they're cheating their voters, typical populists. So, but they say, of course, we are not providing aid. It's the commercial business. We not intervene. It's their business, and if they decided to do so, it's up to them. This is their excuse. So, of course, this makes some allies happy that Slovakia continues. It's not blocking, like Hungary, the aid to Ukraine. And therefore, there is, I would say, there is certain understanding or ignorance of the things which are taking place in Slovakia, because Slovakia continues to provide certain help to Ukraine. So, and from the bigger picture perspective, from the broader perspective, it's from some countries, it's more important than the things which are taking place in Slovakia. So they're using this tool to do whatever is necessary for them to be done from their perspective in politics, internal politics in Slovakia, while playing the good guys in this game with Ukraine.
Juraj, last question. Put on your crystal ball and tell me what's going to happen in Slovakia through the rest of 2024.
We are going to lose more freedom. erosion of the values of the liberal democracy. And I think we will end up very soon in the system of controlled democracy, where the media will be controlled, the NGOs will struggle, the civil society will struggle, and that's basically it.
So you believe the current government, the right-leaning government, whether or not Mr. Fico is actually active or not, but his administration is going to continue down the transformation to an authoritarian government for at least the remainder of this year?
That's for sure. I believe this for sure.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but it's reality. I hope it doesn't happen, but I believe that you are correct. Unfortunately, in the United States, as I said last time, we're unfortunately dealing with a similar situation, and that's extremely depressing. Not to us, but not just to us, but for the entire world, the entire Western world. Juraj Krupa, thank you so much for coming back again 3 weeks after that horrible situation with the Prime Minister and the attempted assassination. Please take care of yourself, stay safe, and let's talk again soon. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much for the invitation, and take care. All the best to you.
Thank you for watching this edition of the No Delusion Zone. And remember, anyone can have their own delusions, but they can't have their own facts. Take care, stay safe, and stay sane.